Today I'm going to show you how you can use one plugin to take your mix from this to this. Welcome back to the Band Guide, where we use GarageBand to create professional sounding music. I'm your band guy, Colin, and today I want to show you the BX Master Desk Classic by Brainworx. This is a really cool plugin that is basically a mastering suite in one plugin. So you can use this one plugin to master your music. It's really, really powerful. It sounds really, really good, and it's really, really easy to use. I typically am not a fan of tools like this, these tools that have a bunch of functions in one. I think they either oversimplify and don't give you enough options, or I think they become too complex and are just confusing and hard to use and get good results with. But I think this plugin kind of nails it. And it lends a little bit of analog character to the tone of your master in a really easy to dial in way that's really cool, really powerful. So this plugin is not necessarily for mixing. This is really a plugin that's designed for mastering, which is a step that happens after you finish mixing your music. So you've recorded your song, and then you mix it, you get it to all the right levels, all the tracks within your mix to the right levels so they all sound good relative to each other and together as one holistic song. And then you master it. And mastering is a process where you're taking your music and you're preparing it to stand next to another song on a playlist, for example, right? So commercial music, if you're listening on Spotify, you don't want your music to come on after someone else's song and sound drastically different, way quieter, way different tone. Mastering is that final little step that gets it up to commercial volume standards and then can kind of help balance tone across your full project. So if you're working on an album or an EP, and then against other commercial releases. So it's a really important step. It's not mixing. You still always need to be aiming for the best mix possible if you want to make your music sound really great. But mastering is that final step that you definitely need. If you want your music to be loud and sound loud, you need to be mastering it. But a great master is not going to make a bad mix sound good. If you really want your music to sound good, you need to get a good mix. And I want to give you something to help with that. I've put together a 6-step checklist that walks through the 6 components that all professional mixes have and how you can do them inside GarageBand completely free. You can download it at the link in the description below. We actually mix a song from this video on this channel live following this exact 6-step process to show you all the steps to demonstrate how you can actually put these together to get a professional sounding mix in GarageBand. So be sure to download that guide. It's completely free from the link in the description below. But let's go ahead and dive in and start looking at this plugin. We're gonna go through all the components of the plugin, and then we're gonna actually dial in a master with this plugin much faster than you might be expecting. Oh, and by the way, this plugin is actually completely free right now. This is a plugin that is typically $150, but right now through Plugin Alliance, you can download it completely free until November 24th. So when you're watching this in the future, it might no longer be free, but it still might be a great value. Good mastering really starts at minimum, typically $40 for a song. So if you're working on one project, or if you know you're gonna be recording a lot of songs, and you like the functionality and think this would be helpful to you, it might be worth $150. I am in no way affiliated with Plugin Alliance or Brainworx. I just think this is a great plugin. So let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, so the first thing I recommend you do when you open up this plugin for the first time is click on this little question mark here and hit Open Manual. They've put together a really short, really helpful manual that just walks through everything you need to know about this plugin, what every little component is, and how they recommend that you go about setting it. And we're going to go through all of that in this video as well, but this dives a little bit deeper, a little bit more specifically. So definitely check it out. In here, they talk about their 1, 2, 3 process. So they've set this up to have just a 3-step process, which is actually pretty similar. It looks a little bit different, but it's very similar to the functionality of the process that I talk about in mastering on this channel as well. Same general concepts. So they've taken those steps and literally labeled them on the plugin. So step 1 is volume, step 2 is foundation, step 3 is tone, and then they have a few extra bonuses that you can tweak if you want to bring out a little bit extra in terms of the stereo enhancement or the saturation. Really, really helpful. So let's go through these in order. Now, they recommend, and I strongly recommend as well, that you always reference against other songs as you're dialing in your masters. So a commercial release, a professionally recorded and mixed song that you really like the sound of that's in a similar genre to what you're working on, have that up against either in Spotify, or if you have an MP3 or WAV file, bring it into GarageBand and be checking it against your master as you're going through it, and make sure that you're getting close to the way that their final master sounds in terms of volume, in terms of tone. And if you do that, it's really going to translate a lot better. So in this video, we're not going to do that because I can't play other people's songs without their permission. So we're just going to focus on getting the tone that we like in this. But at every step along this, you want to be checking, is the volume close to their volume? Is the low end close to their low end? Is the upper end of this mix, is the brightness close to their brightness? Does it mine need a little more stereo width? Every little thing that you're setting, you should check against the reference master. So that will really help you out. But let's go ahead and jump in and start going through these steps. The first thing on here is the volume, so let's go ahead and dial that in. Now, they give you a meter built into this plugin. This is not a LUFS meter. This is a little bit different. It's measuring dynamic range, and they recommend that you go between -8 on the low end and -6 kind of on the upper end. So you don't really want to go past -6. Again, listen against a reference song and see what sounds to be about as loud as you're dialing it in. But let's go ahead and dial this up and get in a range that feels about right for us. Somewhere around there sounded really good to me. It's nice and loud now. Huge difference if we listen to this off and on. Crazy. Huge difference in volume right off the bat. It has a built-in limiter, so it's not going to distort or get too weird at the top end, and it also has a compressor that's helping control the dynamics. Okay, the second step that they talk about is setting the foundation. So the foundation is kind of the low end of your mix. If we set this really extreme, you'll be able to hear it. You can either add or take away low end on the mix. So you want to listen to your mix against a reference, and if you need a little bit more low end, try to dial it in until it's feeling right to you. Be timid here. You don't want to be excessive in this stage, but a little bit in either direction can definitely help you get closer to that reference track. So let's go ahead and dial in until it's feeling good to us. It's feeling really full in that low end. I love it. A good foundation. I like that word for this. Okay, and then we have our tone. Now the tone here is a tone knob, and it's connected to these 4 buttons. So these 4 buttons all have slight different characteristics. They all sound a little bit different. They're emulating different kind of analog circuitry. And to hear that, what I recommend you do is just dial this way up and then flip between the 4 buttons here. So So they kind of explain this in the manual, but B and D both have a little bit of a resonance bump. B has a resonance bump in the low mids and in the upper frequencies as well. And then D has one just in the low mids. And you can really hear that if you focus in on the cymbals and the vocals. As I switch between B and D, you'll notice that there's a big difference in the way that high end is perceived. So you'll want to check against a reference. Do you need more of that kind of upper mid brightness, or do you have plenty in your mix and you don't need any more? In this case, I think I like the sound of the B, and I'm going to just dial in until I'm hearing it and then scale it back a little bit. You don't want to go overboard with this or it can start to sound really unnatural. So let's just dial it up until we're hearing it and then scale it back a little bit. So I'm liking it somewhere around there. And now there's 2 other things that you can adjust here: stereo enhancement and THD, which is total harmonic distortion. This is essentially saturation that goes throughout your mix. And right off the bat, it's already dialed in a little bit for you. So there's a little bit of saturation that happens automatically with this plugin, which is kind of what you get when you're working with analog gear in the real world. And it's nice that they build that in, but you can scale it back if it's for some reason not working in your mix, or you can scale it up if you want a little bit more. It doesn't get very extreme, so it's not really adding distortion into your mix, but it can give you a little bit more warmth and brightness at the same time. So notice if we bring it to 0, and as I dial it up, how you hear a little bit more low end, kind of low mid range, and then a little bit more brightness as well. Higher, higher, oh, I'll take you higher, higher, oh my love. It's very, very subtle, but I really like the low, mid, and brightness that I get as I scale it up a little bit. So again, it starts at 60, negative 60, but I'm liking it somewhere around this negative 40 mark. Okay, and then the stereo enhancement. Now this is a little bit different than some stereo enhancements. This is really focused on EQing the left and right ears a little bit differently than the center to add a little bit more perceived width in your mix. A really cool feature. So let's just play around with dialing this up a little bit and see how it sounds. If we can go to the left, that will make it more mono sounding, less stereo width, and we can make it really extreme. So let's go from here down and then also up. Higher, higher, oh, I'll take you higher, higher, oh my love. Higher, higher. So I definitely like what it adds, but it's a little extreme when we get to that 100%. So let's see if we can dial it up a little bit to where we're noticing it, and then dial it back a little bit so it still sounds natural. Higher, higher, oh, take you higher, higher, oh my love. Higher, higher. Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay, and then two last things to talk about. We have the compressor here, and then we have output trim. So let's focus on the compressor first. What I love about this compressor is it's just two options. You have hard compression, and if you click on it, you get soft compression. So you can just decide, do I like this better, or do I like this better? And just go back and forth, really listening, and decide which you like better. So let's start with hard, and then we'll switch to soft and listen to both. Higher, higher, oh, I'll take you higher, higher, oh my love. Higher, higher, oh. They're very, very similar, but I do notice the snare a little bit more. If you focus in on the snare, cuts through a little bit more when it's on soft than when it's on hard. Okay, and then lastly, output trim. So output trim is just the peak volume. This is something you want to set to make sure that it isn't peaking beyond a level that is acceptable on platforms like Spotify. So historically, just anything below 0 was considered a, quote, safe level. So people would often set it at negative 0.1, negative 0.2. For a long time, negative 0.5 was a standard. Now, Spotify requires -1. So what I would recommend is just set this at -1 and don't think any more about it. Okay, so here's the master that we've set up. Higher, higher, oh, I'll take you higher. One cool thing that you can do here is you can actually copy all these settings and paste it onto a different profile here. So A, B, C, D up here are just 4 different settings that you can set individually, and then you can see which one you like best. So you can play around with it a couple times and see which one you think actually sounds the best. So we just did C here. What I want to do is copy it and paste it here, but I'm going to dial back everything except for the added volume. So we're going to turn everything back to 0, and just notice the tonal differences that we're bringing out with just these components over here. So this is our original with just added volume. Higher, higher, oh, I'll take you higher, higher, oh my love. Higher, higher, oh, I'll take you higher, higher. You notice a little bit more width. You notice a little bit more of that upper mid-range that sounds really, I don't know, clean, professional. As that just comes with the analog tone of this plugin. It's really, really cool. The last thing that I'll say is that while I like the foundation knob, I do think that this plugin can be enhanced with just a little bit of subtle EQ. So when I was referencing this as I was getting ready for this video, I noticed that the reference track had a lot more sub information. And so I spent a little bit of time just playing with some subtle EQ, dialing up a little bit more sub information, scaling back a little bit on the mid-range, and then adding just a little bit extra sheen into the upper mid frequencies. Notice what this does, how it just adds a little bit more into the sub range of this song. Check it out. It's kind of crazy, right? It's kind of like the mix drops lower, like sinks down lower. It's really cool. Listen to it one more time off, and then when I engage it, notice how it just kind of sinks lower. It's really cool, and that really holds through in other parts of the song. Gives it a little bit more low end, helps reinforce that bass a little bit. It's really, really cool. So I think this plugin with just a little additional EQ potentially is enough to master your music and get great, great sounds. Very simply, again, there's not a whole lot going on. It's not a lot that you have to learn to tweak. It's just, do I like the sound of this better? Let me dial in a little bit of this. Again, check it against a reference, but it allows you to safely get a lot more volume in your mix, safely add in a little bit of harmonic distortion without adding in distortion. It's a more advanced tool, but this makes it really, really simple. And then some analog tone shaping capabilities that are really easy to dial in, and stereo enhancement that's really easy to dial in. I'm a big fan of this plugin. I'll definitely be using it in the future. But the only reason that we can use this plugin to get a good final sound is because we took time during the mixing process to get a really good final mix. Your master can only ever be as good as your mix, so you need to take time to get a professional sounding mix. And I want to give you something to help with that. I've put together that 6-step checklist that I mentioned at the beginning of this video that just walks through the 6 steps that all professional mixes have and how to do them inside GarageBand completely free. You can do this. This song was mixed in GarageBand on this channel. You can check it out following this 6-step process. So you can follow those exact same steps with your music and get a more professional sounding mix. There's a link in the description below where you can download it completely free. It's really going to help you out. Before we go, I want to hear from you. Do you master your music? If not, you definitely need to be. This is really the final step to bring out the extra volume, to make sure that it's loud and it's not going to sound really quiet next to other songs, or too quiet in your car. You turn your car volume all the way up. It's a really important final step. Let me know in the comments below. If this video is helpful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video.
One thing at a time, I can only